smoke. OVS, Old Virginia smoke. Old Virginia.
This podcast is brought to you by the Kansas City BBQ Store, the official provider of barbecue supplies to listeners of Pitmaster. And you don't want to miss out on this discount from the Kansas City BBQ Store. From smokers and fuel to rubs and sauces, the Kansas City BBQ Store has everything and anything you could possibly want. Make the Kansas City BBQ Store your one-stop shop for all your outdoor cooking needs. As a listener of the OVS Pitmaster podcast, you can get 10% off of your order this spring by using the code PITPOD, P-I-T-P-O-D, all caps, for online orders at www.thekansascitybarbecuestore.com. This podcast is brought to you by BarbecueData.com. BarbecueData.com is your one-stop shop for all of your barbecue competition data. Historical data, calls, wins, placements, everything under one roof. It's a great way not only to track yourself in the standings, but also to track how you improve your scores from year to year. Listeners of this podcast can receive 20% off of a new subscription to BarbecueData.com with the code PITPOD. That's one word, all capital letters, P-I-T-P-O-D, PITPOD. So check your team scores, check on others, and do it all on BarbecueData.com. Welcome to another edition of Pitmaster and Old Virginia Smoke Podcast. My name is Luke Darnell, host of the podcast. And we have with us this weekend somebody who had a pretty good weekend this past weekend. We've got Aaron Stoffer with Man Meat. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well. I'm just trying to take it all in this week.
Right, because you seem to put together kind of an incredible weekend out at the KCBS Worlds, and with a RGC on the open day, and then followed that up with a GC on the Invitational. Man, congratulations! That's a hell of an accomplishment.
Well, thanks. I'm still trying to figure out how it happened. I know, obviously you have to cook good food and whatnot, but man, in that field, it's a field like that. You typically expect to do well one day and then opposite of the next. Usually flip flops, right?
Right. You're not expecting to be in those top two both days, but now if you factor in last year's Royal with Grant from QU, like, this is becoming a regular occurrence.
Yeah. I don't know how either, right? It's just, man, I guess maybe it's happened so long that it hasn't happened like this, that the odds, have to shake out eventually. It's just the way it's working.
Absolutely. I think so. I mean, especially if you're in the groove and you're cooking well, and went to BarbecueData.com and checked out your stats, and you've had, a lot of top tens this year. But that's a hell of a contest to be your first win for the year too.
Well, Barbecue Data show that's usually where, not this big, obviously, but we've been fortunate enough that all of our wins have been in big fields. So I don't know if it's just, I think it's just part of where we cook. There's a lot of always cooking against Joe and Brad, it seems, every week.
Right, and you cook in one of the hotbeds out there, and that makes it, when you're cooking against Joe and Brad, and gosh, you can list off 20 teams out there in that area. Yeah,
you just keep running down the list. Blaine and Darren and whoever, Shiggin, and it seems to be a bloodbath every week, and I don't know. It's just I was kind of talking to somebody else, and it really doesn't matter where you go anymore. Everybody knows how to cook barbecue these days with all the classes that have been out there. So there's nowhere to hide anymore.
I would agree 100% with you. There's rarely a weak field out there anymore. You can't. I'm sure there's pockets and places where you can go do it, but by and large, there's going to be 10 to 15 teams that can win any contest that they're at. So,
Sure.
and you were right about that with the advent of classes and all the information available. Yeah, it's created a level playing field for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also created a situation where, you know, I, I don't, I don't want to take away anything from anybody from any time frame, but 20 years ago, I don't know if when you showed up, I've heard Donnie Teal talk about it. It's like usually when you show up, back when he was cooking, and of course, his record got broken over the weekend, and it was 22 years old or 22 years ago, right? That he set the highest score ever, and
Oh wow!
so his 22-year record got broken over the weekend, not by us, but by Kurt Wallace, Smoking and Furious, another Oklahoma team. I don't know what it is in Oklahoma. Um, he would say, he's like, yeah, you'd show up and there'd be two, maybe three people who you expect those two or three are going to be top two or three. And now it's you can get surprised. The cream continues to rise to the top, but there's not a week that you're like, oh, that's a new team in the top. So
Right.
yeah, it's Brad needs to stop doing classes is what needs to happen.
I did not know that about Donnie had the highest score ever until this weekend. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. So it was just a magical weekend all around out in Kansas.
Yeah, apparently.
That's
It's
pretty
crazy
cool.
that somebody, and what's crazy if you look at that field, somebody had to come in last, and it was even if you look at where it's unfortunate for somebody to come in last, and Love to Q did, but I think his score was still 676. When was the last time you saw a last place finisher at that high of a score?
Right. That's crazy.
I think our first or second reserve grand was with a 670 something. I think there have been contests with people winning with that score.
Oh, I reserved Grand Lake Placid once with a 639 and only lost by a point.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Score doesn't matter, right?
no, but scoring differences throughout regions, that is something that definitely exists.
Yeah.
It's
Sure.
yeah, you have to Lake Placid, and first thing we would tell people is don't look at the numbers. Just
Your overall finishes. Yeah.
just look at the finishes. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
So you had you had to prepare for this throughout the weekend. What was your mindset like going from day one of RGCing to day two, having to reload and do that again? What kind of frame did you have to get into?
I don't know that I got out of a frame of mind between the 2 days. It sounds really strange.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And it was, day one we reserved with a 7-Eleven, day one, right?
That's incredible.
When has a 7-Eleven reserved? I mean, it doesn't happen every day. And we had a really good cook, and while we were doing awards, sitting through there, we got a chicken call. Smoke and Furious got first place chicken, and then and it was just like every category. He put together a cook where he was out every single category. He finished higher than we did, but it was in brisket when it came down to second place, and they said second place with a perfect 180, and they called our name. At that point, I'm like,
got a
we may have
chance.
just won. We may have just won this. Um, and and so got on this real high and got up. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was really pumped. Um, and they were moving along pretty quick between placings, but between second and first and brisket, they took a little longer. And I was actually walking back from getting my picture taken at the step and repeat when they called first place, and I literally am. I don't know if I said it out loud or if I just said it loud enough in my head that I thought I said it out loud. That I'm like, anybody but Smoked and Furious, and they call Smoked and Furious, and it's like I go from this high to, well, we just did not win.
We just probably finished second, but yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, Joe had 3 calls. Rooters and Tutors had 2 or 3 calls. And Curtin and us, we were the only ones with 4. And so I'm like, in that field, you did typically, day one, it was 90 teams. You typically expect that there's not going to be a 4-call team in that field that day. To have 2 was crazy, but I mean, we had a really good cook. I really liked what we turned in, and Christy and I we looked at each other and we were like, man, and if we can get a pork call, it's going to be a good day. And then we got 12th place pork, and so I'm like, man, there's a shot here. Like if we got 12th place and we're in the running, and so it felt really good about the cook, but the high didn't last very long. As soon as they called him, I knew he'd won, and at that moment, I mean, the letdown happened so fast, and I didn't have to sit on it when they were going over the overalls, right? So dragging that out, and if he got 3 calls and we got the 4. We went back and looked. All he had to do was be 28th in brisket, and he would have still won.
Wow.
So I mean, he spread the field. I mean, like 6 points. He beat us by 6, and we beat Joe by 5. So third place was 11 points behind first. I mean, so and Joe had a 706 or something like that. I mean, he had big
right.
too. But I didn't ever get out of the mindset of, okay, this isn't, this could be another cook, same cook, right? And we did the barbecue draft, and I was the one that hosted it, and so I was trying to get score sheets after it all. So there was just so much going on that I didn't really even focus on the fact that we reserved the contest,
right?
Which was very strange, and we haven't had a whole lot of success this year. We've been top 10, but you saw there's a bunch of 8s and 9s in there, and
but I think but I would argue that a lot of the contests anymore getting into the top 10 is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, it's great.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for us this year, I mean, we have been searching a lot this year. And so I don't know if we were on Tailgate Guys earlier this week, and he was asking, but our average score is not even a 690 this year. And this last weekend, actually the last 2 weeks, has really moved it up. But we have been working on developing some new products and been running them week in, week out. And so I attribute a lot of what we've been doing to development, right? I don't have time to practice at home during the season. But at the same time, I'm not going to wait until the off season to practice it, because the best feedback I can get is a score from a judge.
Right, absolutely. And I know that you had your chicken brine came out earlier in the year. Is that correct?
Yep, it came out. We pushed it out at the end of the year. It was available retail in March or February, at the end of February, I think. So so we've been running that, but that was actually something that we tested at home. I went through cooked chicken a lot. Cooked a lot of wings, cooked a lot of thighs to get that out, because I wanted to make absolute sure before it hit shelves that it was right. And it's done quite well this year for those that have been using it. So we had 4 180s since July 1st, and one of those came this weekend in that field. So it's been going quite well.
That's awesome, man.
But it's definitely not game changer. We went a different direction, but it's good stuff. But anyway, that's been one of the things. But I mean, we've been in development phase. We've been working on a pork injection, on a beef injection, and another rub that all, I would say, after this last weekend, are finalized in their current state. I think we can go with it now.
I think so. I think it's not bad. So I have to ask you, what was it like the first time anybody called you world champion, Aaron Stoffer?
It kind of makes your hair stand up on it. It's like on the back of your neck, and it just did it just when you said it.
Good.
It's so weird. It's crazy.
It is crazy, and it's a heck of a thing too, man. Like, because you've been around for a while, and you've been successful, and you're being successful in the business side of it as well, and it's just really great to see it. To see, especially a good person. I got to spend some time with you earlier this year at the Big 12 thing, and yeah, it's a great time. And I mean, I just wanted to offer you the full congratulations, and I wanted to say that, and it gave me the goosebumps too, dude.
Well, I really appreciate that. It is, but it's still, people say it, and I still don't believe it, and I'm like, and I know there's still a lot out there. It's like, is the KCBS World Invitational a true world championship? I think I think people will get to the point where it's full buy-in, right? And after this last weekend, the field of people who were there, I don't see how you can't call it that.
Right, absolutely. I don't think that's up for debate. And especially now, they had to have a year where they had to move the date, and I know that turned some teams off, and some people couldn't go, and that's fair. But now that it's going to be hopefully in a more regular calendar, I think you'll start to see that field grow and grow and grow, and until it'll rival, a lot of the other bigger contests. It's
sure.
Yeah, it's a great.
So
great
I do want to speak to the contest this year. I mean, so this was the first year in what, 3 years that it was done with just as a contest, not with the banquet. And I will tell you, it was the most fun invitational that I have done.
That's great to hear.
And I mean, because the teams got to enjoy the venue, got to enjoy socializing. It wasn't just packed. As soon as you show up, before you show up, you get checked in, and you do get set up and all of that. Then you go to you get ready for a cook. You cook, you clean up, you go to a banquet for team of the year, and then you have to cut that short to go back and prep for the next day. It was
Way
and
too
then there's
much.
way too much, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't get to really fully enjoy the social aspect of barbecue and just have, hey, we're here because this is a world championship, right? We're here to be serious and we're here to cook. And this year, I mean, it was that way. It was awesome. And, and so I hope that, we do, we lock down a date and to me, I think locking down a location will put some prestige to it. But whether it's Kansas City or wherever, from a logistical standpoint, it makes more sense in the Midwest just to be able to pull from both East and West Coast. You don't alienate
Sure.
one end or the other. It does favor the Midwest in that regard, but there's no perfect answer.
No, I'd like to see it move a little bit. Like, you go a little further west or come a little further east, not all the way east, but
Sure.
if you did something like Louisville or something down in Kentucky around Bourbon Country, I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I've listened to enough of your shows. I did pour myself a bourbon before the start of the show.
It's funny. I poured one and I left it downstairs.
Oh no.
And it's because I had to do this other podcast last night, and I ended up having Kim bring the bottle up to where I filmed, just because it was I sort of pirated their podcast and kind of did what I wanted with it, and I kind of felt bad about it for a second, but it was pretty entertaining. But I just wanted to have you on here and get your immediate reaction after pulling off of a fantastic weekend, dude. That is
and I mean it is. I do appreciate that, and it kind of finish the mindset thing. I know we kind of got off track. That's what bourbon does, but the mindset between day one and day two is, I didn't get to bed until about 11 o'clock. We ended up having a later dinner. It went longer. And so it was just like, okay, let's focus. And in between, so I made a change from the week before to both my ribs and my pork. And so when we were in Tahlequah, we reserved there, but it was I can't remember if it was ribs or pork. It was I think it was ribs that kept us out of the GC. And I think all we needed was one more point, and we would have won that one. But there was something just a little off on my flavors, and I've been analyzing that over the last several weeks, and so we were like, we're making a change, and so we made a change. It was a small one. We made a small change to the rub, and I did what you're not supposed to do, but I made two changes. I made a change to my wrap. But those two changes made a drastic difference and just balanced everything out, and just it worked. And so, but when I showed up, I pre-make my wrap for pork and ribs, and it's the same wrap for both. And so I made the other one, the one that I had been using, just in case that if day one it didn't work, I could immediately go back to day two and go to something that I knew I could. I knew what would happen most likely. And so since we did well on day one, I'm like, I didn't plan for if it actually worked. And so I was scrambling around trying to find the stuff. And Joe, being as nice as he is, had a bottle of, one of the ingredients that I needed that I needed in the wrap. And So I needed 2 ingredients that I didn't have to make a new batch. Found them, made it up, and was good to go. But so I was a little concerned because I make that wrap a week ahead, so that way I could sit and develop what I'm looking for. And I'm like, I don't have time for a week. I'm going to try to fast track it. So I warmed it a little bit
Right.
on Sunday to kind of speed that up. But yeah, no, it was, so we did all of that Saturday night and got to bed late and, got up early. And then when I got up, we had a storm roll through and it was, anywhere from 30 to 40 mile an hour wind gusts and
Wow.
pouring down rain right when I needed to light the drums. like exactly when I needed to light the drums. And so I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know how fast this is going to roll through. I was looking at my radar and I'm like, okay, well, if it keeps moving like it is, 10 or 15 minutes, I could probably speed that up somehow. But I'm always pushing it on brisket anyway, on the brisket drum. It's most of the time it gets to temp. Sometimes it's lagging a little bit, depending on airflow and whatnot. But I lit at like 6:15 and brisket goes on at 6:30, and I don't use a weed burner. I just use a tumbleweed.
Right.
So I waited for the wind to die down. The rain was still pouring. I'm like, okay, I can get my awning out and get these drums. I had to move the drums around on my porch, and just to get the brisket drum under cover to get it lit. And so I'm like, so the cook started out a little frantic just from that standpoint, but that's not the most important part of your cook. So, I knew I could catch up somewhere. And so, yeah, we got that. And then as I was trying to light the chicken drum a little later, the same thing happened. A new storm came through but I didn't have any space to move that drum around. And so I had it lit and the fire kept going out because the rain kept pouring into it. And I'm like, this is going to be real challenging. I had wet charcoal. And so I got it all going and got the lid. Once I get the lid on, the drums will run just fine. There's little rain, no matter how hard it's coming down, isn't going to affect those things. So I finally got it there, got everything going, and so everything went the way it was. So I just had a really good cook, and knowing we finished well on Saturday, when we got done with that cook, I turned brisket in and I came back to the trailer. I shut the door. As soon as I shut the door, Christy looked at me and she was like, "I'm sorry." And I
Why?
I knew exactly why she said I'm sorry. I said, I know, me too. We both liked our cook.
Are you one of those guys? Are you one of those guys that when you don't want to like the cook?
I don't want to like the cook.
Why?
Because it always bites you, right? When you think it's right and you think you hit it, you get humbled so fast. And so I'm like I looked at her and I kind of shook my head and I'm like, all right, well, I think we gave the judges good food. Let's do, get everything, whatever, go. But we expected to sit there and we expected to.
Wow.
We're like, yeah, the odds are against us. We're not going to finish at the end. And as we start going down and then when we won chicken, I'm like, oh, that's kind of crazy. Thought it was really good, but I'm like, that was crazy. And then we got a good rib call. And then we got a better pork call. And I'm like, I started thinking, I'm like, oh my goodness, this could be something kind of crazy. And then we sat there, no brisket call. And that was the one category that I was actually a little concerned with. I thought the tenderness was close. It needed probably 10 more minutes on the cooker. But but the flavor was just a little flat. The meat itself, I didn't have the flavor that I had the day before, So I was finishing hard. I was grabbing multiple things to get flavor into the meat without it just being on the outside. Um, and so I was doing so many testers. Like, okay, I've got to see if this works or if this works. And I thought we did it, but we ended up finishing 36th in brisket, and so, but it was still good enough. 36 with the 173. So I mean, I'll take a.
You could take that all day.
I'll take that all day.
So,
And so, yeah, even when they got down to first place, I kind of knew, but at the same time, I was prepared. Brad got 3 calls. Jordan got 2 really high. I think he had 2 first, or a first and a second. And I knew Jordan. He's a day 2 cook every week. He just is lights out day 2. And then Bill Hine, Triple H, he had a couple really high calls as well. And so I'm like, man, this is gonna hurt to go reserve 2 days in a row, or be third or fourth. It would still be a huge accomplishment, right?
absolutely.
Out there in that field, and I'm like, man, I need to buy a win somehow. And when Brad got called for fourth, I'm like, oh, Brad was the one actually I was concerned with.
Right.
He's Brad, and he got 3 calls. And so I figured he was probably like 17th or 18th in brisket, or pork. Because he got a brisket call, but I was like, oh, he's a killer pork cook, so I'm sure he was just outside of the top 15. So he probably had a really high score, and then when he got called for fourth, it was a little bit of a sigh of relief, but I'm like, I'm scrambling in my mind. I'm like, okay, what did Jordan have? Did he only have 2? Did he have 3? And then the same with Bill. And then when they got those 2 names out of the way, it was just, I didn't want to just assume still, because you never know.
Right.
When they called us, I just kind of lost my breath, and Christy kind of tackled me in the chair a little bit. And that was the longest walk up to get those trophies. It was the coolest thing. All of the barbecue family just came up and congratulated and hugs, and it was Jordan was one of the first ones there, and Kurt and Schaefer. It was just so cool. I will never forget that.
No, man, no. It's a great walk, dude, and that's. Let me ask you a question though.
Mm-hmm.
Will you now change your protocol on not wanting to like your cook?
No.
That's funny.
I will. It's the more, again, I've just been burned so many times liking my cook, and it not turning out the way I hope or expect.
See, I am the exact opposite. If I like to think that I'm just truthful with myself. Like, people ask me how to go. Well, I missed on pork. I knew that on Saturday, the contest I was at this weekend. But on Sunday, somebody said, I bet you there's 2 700s today. And I said, I'm probably one of them. And they just looked at me, and I'm like, man, it was really good.
Yeah.
And of course, they were shocked that somebody would say something like that.
Sure.
But I mean, I also knew that I didn't miss, and yeah. So
well,
man,
okay. Well, I guess let me rephrase that. Until after the cook, I won't admit that I have a good cook.
Until after the cook.
After awards.
After awards, got it.
Right. So it's, I know internally, and and it's Christy and I both. We'll look at each other. We know it was a great cook. We know. If anybody asks, it's just missed. Now, I did feel. I mean, I was honest. I'm going to find the one thing that I felt was wrong, and that's the only thing when somebody asks, that's one thing I'm going to tell them about. It's like, it's a little off here. But I'm not gonna tell anybody that I like my food. There were a couple people that looked at me, and when they were saying, they're like, "You're pulling a Joe or you're pulling a Brad or whatever." I'm like, and I have a hard time keeping a straight face, so I have to either get out or I'm going to get exposed. There were a couple people who caught me, and I'm like, kind of had a little grin about it, but otherwise, no. I just want to keep my mind level, right, going into awards. So
Sure.
So that way, if it does come out and we just hit the wrong tables that day, it's still going to hurt. I guess it's just trying to keep it from hurting bad enough. I mean, we've cooked 188 contests, and we've been through times where it's like thought I had the cook that could easily win it, and not be in the top 2 or 3. So and so it's just you gotta keep your mind straight, and and if you let it go too much, and we've chased for a few years, and it was very strange. There was at one point in time when we had, even though it was early in the year, we saw our name at the top of the points chase, and it was during COVID and whatnot, but we sat number 1 like 7 weeks through the middle of summer one year, and the mind games that happen at that point. I mean, there's a reason that Brad's won 4 times Team of the Year. There is a lot to it with the mental aspect of it.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I didn't ask you any of the normal questions intentionally, because I think we need to do a part 2. I really just wanted to get your thoughts and feelings on this weekend, and you really let it out, man. I really appreciate that, and I know that the listeners will. And also, if you guys pay attention, he drops some hints in there to some of the stuff that he does. So, tell people where they can find you and find your products.
So our website is The Real Man Meat BBQ. You can find us on Instagram, The Real Man Meat BBQ, Facebook, Man Meat BBQ, or BBQ, and then YouTube, or in a parking lot somewhere around the Midwest every weekend. So, but it's, that's where you can find us. Or Great. you can find, so if you want to keep up with what's going on, what we're doing, those are the places. We have product in all over the country in different retailers, mostly barbecue stores. We have a tab on there that shows a map of all the locations, and then different online avenues as well. So, and
I'm sure you're in the Kansas City barbecue store.
Definitely. Actually, Absolutely. I just dropped off several cases of poultry primer today. So they are stocked up.
Hear that, folks? Run over there. All right, Aaron. Well, I'm looking forward to doing part 2 with you, buddy, because we need to definitely do it and go through the questions. But I'm also looking forward to seeing you here in about a month out at the Royal.
I can't wait for that. It's always such a great time.
It's the best. But congratulations, world champ.
Thanks, Luke.
Thank you for listening to Pitmaster, an Old Virginia Smoke podcast. Be sure to subscribe and like the podcast, rate the podcast, and to share it out with all your friends. Also, be sure to check out the Old Virginia Smoke YouTube channel as well. Tune in next week for another great episode of Pitmaster. For companies interested in advertising, please contact Old Virginia Smoke directly via www.oldvirginiasmoke.com. Pitmaster, an Old Virginia Smoke podcast, is edited by Chris Sedenka. Pitmaster, an Old Virginia Smoke podcast, is a property of Old Virginia Smoke, LLC. All rights reserved.
Old Virginia Smoke.